Hello, thanks for joining me. In this video I'm going to take you on a tour of St Mary's Church, Llanfair Nant Gwyn, a beautiful Victorian church by the architect Robert Jewell Withers. I'm something of a fan of Withers, and I hope by the end of this video you'll understand why. This church dates from the mid-1850s and was one of Withers' first churches in this area. He was commissioned to turn a plain, cramped Georgian preaching box, about a century old, into an attractive high Victorian church with a budget of only £500. Withers' answer to this challenge was to retain the walls as far as possible, add a vestry and porch, replace the sash windows with Gothic tracery, and remodel the interior. He didn't have a lot of money or space to work with, so he went in the only dimension he could alter: height. The whole effect is one of dizzying verticality. The low roof went, and this steeply pitched one was added. If you look carefully, you can see the join about halfway up on the east and west end, where he had to add masonry to add height. The windows are paired cusped lancets with an echoing upward thrust, and then there's the tall and slender spirelet, which adds even more height. The way he plays with geometrical shapes in the buttress which supports the spirelet is a mark of Withers' artistry. He could just have run a rectangular sectioned buttress all the way up to the base of the square sectioned spirelet, but no, instead it goes through a series of graceful transitions, shifting from one shape to another and even changing from local stone to Bath stone and back again. Withers was the kind of architect who believed that form should follow function. None of that Georgian habit of hiding the construction of a brick building under layers of stucco imitating stone, no pretending something was something else. The timber roof trusses show through on the gables outside, something I don't think he repeated in any subsequent building, but it's a nice touch. From the outside, this emphasis on a tall and pointed outline is very effective. It also makes the church look much larger than it is. It's a sort of reverse of Doctor Who's TARDIS. It looks big on the outside, but inside it's actually tiny. This church is kept locked and not open to visitors, but I did get the opportunity to go in, so come inside and I'll show you around. Inside you can see the rest of the supporting work for the spire. Withers used this space to recite memorials from the old church. They are to the Bowen family of Pantaderry Mansion and the Williams family of Trevarch. This is more or less an estate church, and the church was intended as a sort of memorial to the recently deceased Thomas Bowen of Pantaderry and his wife, who was a Williams of Trevarch. There were few people living in this parish, which is just as well given the size of the church. A grant of £60 was given by the ISBC, whose main concern was always the provision of free seats for poorer worshippers, but not all the seats here were free. 71 seats, numbered 4 to 14 and 18 to 21, were reserved for the poorer inhabitants. The ones at the front were reserved for the gentry. They have folding doors to make the point and to stop the poor from getting in. An ingenious solution, but I'm not sure how much Withers would actually have approved. The pews are incredibly close together, no kneeling boards and quite cramped, but he did get a lot of seating in a very small area. Some of the front benches have had to go in order to accommodate the later organ, but otherwise the interior is pretty much as Withers intended it. Windows donated in memory of the Bowens helped add some richness to the chancel. The glass in the east window was designed by Alfred Bell and made by lavers. Withers' aim was to recreate an imagined medieval church with the altar and chancel as the focus, so the decoration is reserved for this area alone. Another window has the arms of the Bowen and Williams families, also by lavers, and the chancel is tiled with specially commissioned encaustic tiles with the Bowen lion. Other encaustic tiles are found on the chancel floor. Probably all the tiles are by Minton. This one is the wrong way round now. I was told it had been put back incorrectly after the body of Grace Jones was interred in the chancel. But this is one of those myths that often gets told and repeated in churches. In fact, intramural burials had been stopped before this church was built, and Grace Jones was buried in 1671. Her ledger stone was resited in the new building. The tile probably just came loose. Withers' fittings are of cheap pitch pine to keep the cost down, but he put effort into their design. He used geometric shapes and open spaces like windows, including in the altar rails, which echo the lancet windows of the walls. The addition of a later organ has removed not only the pews, but also the reading desk and lectern, which Withers had sited on the south wall opposite the pulpit. The reading desk has moved to the chancel, but the pine lectern has gone, replaced by this brass one, giving us a thanks offering for the safe return from the First World War of the sons of William and Sarah Ann Evans of Panterderry. The north lean-to vestry is as small as it could be to function, but not without a few Gothic details, and the type of aumbrey with a shouldered arch seen in Withers' small Welsh churches of the 1850s and 60s. An aumbrey was used to keep the communion vessels in, and was a reintroduction of a medieval pre-Reformation element of church furniture. That Withers considered an aumbrey a necessity in a church tells us something about his own religious leanings and those of his patrons. When he designed this church, such things as well as lighted candles and altars, altar cloths, decorated sanctuaries and stained glass with figures were all controversial. They were considered by many to be too close to Roman Catholic practice for comfort. On either side of the chancel arch, Withers placed images of the monarch and a bishop, the head of the church and the diocese, both portrayed in medieval clothing. The bishop, not a portrait of any particular bishop I should think, wears a mitre on his head. Mitres, still controversial today, went out in the Reformation and came back with the High Church Anglicanism of the mid-Victorian period. The monarch is, of course, in the Victorian age, a queen. Underneath both is a short row of ballflower decoration. This is also found on the font, which is otherwise plain, just geometrical shapes, and which has Minton tiles with a dove representing the Holy Spirit at each corner of its square base. The flat cover has typical Withers decorative ironwork. Robert Jewell Withers had joined the Cambridge Camden Society, later the Ecclesiological Society, in 1844 when he was only 20. His views of what a church should be like were formed early, and this church is perfectly aligned with ecclesiological principles. It has a raised altar, a font by the door, benches, not box pews, pulpit in the nave by the chancel arch. Beauty and sanctity were the aims. I think they were achieved very successfully here. Even though this is a small and out-of-the-way church built on a restrictive budget, Withers' plans for Llanfair Nant Gwyn received an excellent review in the ecclesiological publication of February 1856, beginning, "Mr. Withers has ingeniously transformed into a very good-looking, unpretending, pointed church, a structure full of sash windows built here about 100 years ago." Withers had only been practising as an architect in his own right for less than a decade when he designed this church, and had only just opened his London office and was newly married. This church was one of the first he built in the Cardigan area, a place which was to get him a lot of commissions, and I think it's one of his best. I think he was extremely pleased with it too, and that's not just speculation. In the chancel, just before the vestry begins, he had room to insert a small high window with trefoil tracery, in the centre of which is a roundel with a design that has not previously been recognised for what it is. The Pembrokeshire Pevsner and the listing description couldn't make sense of the initials, but I can. The compasses are the symbol of an architect. There is an obvious R. The central line represents an I, which used to also double as a J, and the yellow letter is a W. Compasses, R. J. W. Robert Jewell Withers, architect. He signed his own church. Withers often gave something as a gift when he built a church, an altar cloth or a window, for example. I'm sure that this window was his gift to Llanfair Nant Gwyn. I hope you've enjoyed the tour of this church. If so, please remember to hit the like button. And as always, thank you for watching.